the council it would obtain for them something that they are desperate for and which local people won't give them, which is forgiveness. And this program would try and turn some of the kind of anger about what happened in Sheffield into a positive regime that hopefully other councils will copy. Whether or not that happens, I don't know. It will entirely depend on the attitude of the council. They may just say absolutely not and ignore us. But then if anyone else thinks they've got a local authority that would be willing to trial it, then I'm happy to work with them to make that happen. And that is, I have some 1 or 2 days a week funded from Lawyers for Nature to work on these kinds of projects now. So that would be potentially willing to work with the local authority for free. So keep your eyes open and ears open for any local authorities that are willing to trial that. Not quite, I don't know if it's outside the remit of the group, but I'm also organising a gathering in the summer with someone from the Woodland Trust to propose rights for ancient woodlands, again taking a rights of nature approach but tightening up the protection of ancient woodlands. Very happy for anyone here who wants to go and work on that to join that, although I know it's slightly outside the street tree kind of remit. And then finally, I'm going to write hopefully a blog post soon. I don't know if you know about the bill that I drafted last year for the Woodland Trust. Does anyone? No, okay. So basically, I drafted a listed trees bill to basically equalise the protection between ancient trees, ancient and veteran trees, and historic buildings, which, as you know, at the moment, TPOs are far inferior to listed building status. And I think that's quite a nice campaign, really, because it's really obvious. It's like, why should a tree and a building of the same age not have the same protection? And basically, I've drafted an entire bill that would be ready to pass that would basically set up a listing system for trees. Again, that wouldn't help all street trees because not all street trees would be listable, but it would definitely help some, and the most precious ones at that. So yeah, and then in between that, trying to do, as you all are, what I can to support individual campaigns, but that's having to do it on a sensible basis and can't do everything. But picking out particularly those campaigns which really provide a speak to a wider issue, I guess. So for instance, the Haringey tree speaks to insurers. Plymouth really spoke to the issue around council destruction. Wellingborough, just a really important local campaign, and of course Hodeswood recently, which is just like the archetype. I don't know if you have seen that on Twitter. Absolutely incredible lack of action from the authorities. It really is the ultimate in why the current regime has failed. So yeah, those are all the things that I've been working on, and yeah, very keen to have anyone else input in those or any suggestions, or if you just want to ask me questions about things, then I'm happy to do that.
Thanks, that sounds brilliant. Yeah,
I just to say, I mean, most things now I'm trying to, like some kind of one-man show pony, just put everything through the rights of nature lens, because frankly I think it all speaks to it, and it just for me takes it out of a kind of random NIMBYs after their trees to no, we're part of a worldwide movement revolutionizing the relationship between humans and nature. Just takes it away from, makes the YIMBYs shut the fuck up, basically. Well, it won't, but makes it easy to ignore them.
Yeah, no, Joe, do you want to come in?
Paul, yeah, sorry for my slowness, but could you just clarify for me what your first proposal was? I don't quite understand what it is that you're proposing for Sheffield Council to take on. Could you just clarify for that for me quickly?
Yeah, actually, just give me a second. I haven't even put this on the Sheffield Tree group yet, so you're going to get this before then. If you just give me 2 secs, I'll get the
scoop.
Sorry, yeah, you'll get a scoop.
Scoop.
I mean, so it's been up on the Lawyers for Nature blog all weekend, but I haven't had time to post it on their Facebook group. So sorry, give me 2 seconds. I'm just trying to find it.
Yeah, it's fine. Yes, thanks for reminding me to record this, by the way, because I'd forgotten. So it will be recorded. So. Although,
can you delete the bit where I said shut the YIMBY to shut the fuck up?
Don't worry, it won't be public. It's anyone who's got.
And just while Paul's looking for that, I'm just going to say send my apologies because I have to bow out at 7 o'clock to go to another meeting. So sorry about that, but very good to see you all at the moment.
Yeah, not to worry. Yes,
Can't find it. Sorry. This is
that's
annoying.
fine.
Maybe we'll do the vote for the strapline before Joe buggers off.
Yes, should we? I mean, we could do that. Is that worth doing now while Paul looks for this blog post?
Yeah, take the pressure off Paul. So
Should we take the pressure off you so you don't have to scrabble around, Paul?
Well, I've actually just found it.
Oh,
But
right.
there we go.
There you
But to
go.
be honest, it'll also give people a chance to read it. So I'm not.
Yeah, no, that's great. So do you want me to share it on screen and you could like read I mean, would that help? Like, shall I? And you could maybe highlight a couple of points in it. I don't know. What do you reckon? Does that sound too irksome?
No, I'm happy. I mean, people can just read it. I mean, basically, the gist of it is that at the moment, that effectively, as we know, councils own their trees in inverted commas, as if they were like, private property, and can largely do what they like to them, and have almost no effective regulatory regime over them because they can set TPOs over their own trees or not set them, as the case may be. So effectively, the rights of nature approach is saying, actually, you don't just own these trees. You are a guardian.
Yeah.
And you have you can't just destroy them at will in the same way you couldn't just, beat your child or starve them. You have to, you have parents look after their children and they can decide certain things, but they can't just, damage or destroy them gratuitously. And so it's a similar idea, really. And what the details of it look like are to be determined between the council and local people, but effectively stepping into that role of seeing themselves as guardians, looking after trees rather than as their total owners. Which, given what's happened in Sheffield, may not be that much different from what they're doing currently, but I think is a very revolutionary approach.
Yeah.
It actually follows on from, I don't know if you were in court for that, Gio, when we were in court for the Haringey tree, and I said that the council were the guardians of the tree, and the judge actually quoted it in his judgment.
Yeah.
He said, as Mr. Powslin romantically put it, they may see themselves as owners, but in fact they are actually guardians holding the trees on trust for local people, and I would say holding trees on trust for themselves. So it would basically be doing that major change and then filling out what rights they think the trees would have and how the guardianship was to be exercised, basically.
So would that come? So that would be like a local authority sort of changing their policy, or would they have to? So they wouldn't necessarily have to be a central government legislative change. It could be a local council taking it.
It would be entirely local council stuff, and obviously there's something of a limit to that, because obviously the tree was on private property. But there's a lot that could be. The discretion over TPOs is massive. As we know, some councils put them on like they're going out of fashion, and some councils just don't bother at all. So actually, even having a council that was more willing to put TPOs on would be good. But frankly, even just for the council's own trees, it would make a massive difference if they viewed themselves as guardians rather than as owners. And it's basically the same thing. Any owner of a tree could voluntarily step into that guardianship approach, and we are actually trying to work with various private landowners about it. But to me, councils are the key. They're the ones that have a lot of power in this, as we know. And starting with Sheffield, where they might be willing to do something a bit revolutionary to try and gain forgiveness that could then be trialed there and used elsewhere, could be very interesting.
I'm just going to bring in Lucy here.
Yeah, I think it sounds a fantastic idea. I just wondered if you'd thought about how you would then, if they said yes, we'll be guardians, how they're then accountable. Would there be some group they would work with who would always be, watching their actions? I mean, how had you thought a step further about what that would mean in practice?
Yeah, sort of to be determined, but I'd imagine some sort of guardianship charter that they would sign up to and be accountable to local people for. Could also, I mean, that's quite interesting. It could also be like, you have countries that are like signatory guardians of treaties between other countries. You could have maybe the Woodland Trust or some other organization as a kind of guarantor of it. But I think the most accountability is going to be from local people.
Yeah.
I think
just to jump in, like with Haringey, they're always saying we're bound by law, we're hamstrung by
good pun, Ali.
Commercial commerce, insurers, commercial kind of, and they're always saying that, like, we can't do anything unless the law changes. So, And I do wonder whether it's because they're on clay soil as well. It might be good to choose a borough that's not on clay soil, so it wouldn't have as many claims, perhaps. But so yeah, you'd have to work with it would have to work with a council that was very, you know, responsive, you know, really interested in doing it. I'd love Haringey to do it, obviously, but I'm not.
Yeah, but what if, like, if a council was a guardian, they did have a lot of these tree cases. Would a guardian just roll over? Would they fight for their tree and join forces with other councils to fight it and to campaign about it? You know, wouldn't it be interesting if you actually had a council tree officer going into conferences and saying, this is unfair, we know the law says this, but this is ludicrous, and we want the law to be changed, and lobbying the local government association. As we all know, you know, obviously they are somewhat subject to the law, but they also have a lot of power in the council to change that law. And I think a council that genuinely saw themselves as a guardian would be much more likely to try and lobby for those changes rather than just rolling over and accepting the status quo, I think.
We've often said, I think that, I mean, it'd be brilliant. We've often said to Haringey, like you said, in fact, our conference UK, the insurance action we did, and you made a really great speech. And because you said this yourself, like, why doesn't Haringey get together with, you know, Camden and Islington, the other two clay boroughs, and mount a kind of tri-borough kind of defense against all these commercial pressures on trees? You know, we've said this loads of times to our council, and they just seem to just brush, you know,
choose a really good test case and then fight them.
Yeah, exactly, fight together. Who else would like to come in? Jeff, and then Penny. Can't hear you at the moment.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
There you go.
You can hear me. Right. What I wanted to ask Paul about is something completely different, and that's finance. Now, obviously, you make a living, Paul. So it's a question of where money.
I mean, not a great one. I'll be honest. Not really, actually.
So I mean, I'm a trustee of a charity that funds long-term projects. I mean, very long-term. Again, you know, most of our time is spent trying to raise money. But how do we find money to pay people like you?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's a good question. I mean, a lot of this stuff isn't necessarily rocket science, you know.
No,
for doing cases, yeah, but for actually reimagining, you know, writing an article about why TPOs are rubbish that can then be shared and then act as a campaign thing doesn't take that long. You know, is obviously I'd rather be paid, but my experience in these things is that is hard to find, and I'm tired of waiting around to do the thing until I get paid for it. So just gonna as well. I mean, as everybody here who's done God knows how many hours between us to try and protect trees, it's just my part of that puzzle, I think.
Yeah, we could do a fundraiser for we could fundraise within Canopy for staff, Jeff. You know,
I mean, Paul. I mean, how many lawyers are like you? I mean,
not many.
That is the problem, is finding people like you. I mean,
Yeah.
Another problem we have is, I mean, I'm a lifelong botanist. Finding people like me is difficult. Finding people who can challenge the council and saying what you're doing is wrong. So it is a problem how we fund people like you, Paul. I'm very conscious of this.
Yeah, we can find a way though.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm sure there are ways, and you know, if yeah.
We're on. You know, once.
But as I said, we managed to have some funding, not for any specific project, but to work on rights of nature in the UK as much as possible for a day or two a week. So, you know, that's something. So
yeah. And I think, you know, once we're set up properly we are already set up, but once we really get established, we can maybe apply for grants and things like that to pay people who can advise, you know, or we go into kind of partnership with, you know, for campaigning. I was going to bring Penny in here, and then there was someone else, can't remember.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, I think in Plymouth we've got a kind of schizophrenic council. We've got the good guys on the sort of community forest side, who we work very closely with, who want to do the right thing and would really their hearts and minds would buy into this approach. But then on the other side of the fence, we've got the highways people and the planning people who aren't as committed and don't really give a damn about the trees. How do we have a sort of two-pronged approach where we can work to persuade the good guys to move to this kind of ethos, but at the same time look to close down loopholes and tighten up things like permitted developments and like learning Latin, all the exceptions that there seem to be for them to get round things and not consult and not follow policies.
The Woodland Trust have proposed a bill to tighten up various aspects of TPO legislation, which definitely should happen. You know, as we saw in Wellingborough, the current permitted development exceptions are ridiculous. So yeah, that's one thing. But as I say, I think there's a thing of going more radical there. And obviously, we want to get those changes to TPO regs, but actually, I think if we're just trying to get minor changes to TPOs, we're going to miss the deeper work here, which is fundamentally transforming the way that we relate to nature and trees. And without that, I think it's always going to be firefighting. And yeah, some changes will be great, but I'm keen to put a wider kind of context to everything rather than just going after the details of regulations.
Yeah, I think, wasn't there, I'm sure there was a petition about recognizing the rights of trees as species, as beings. There was something that was knocking around a few years ago, and I thought it didn't really go very far, but I thought it could have been worded in a bit more dynamically, and you know, that kind of idea that the rights of other species, you know, what's it called? Exceptionalism. So like the human centric kind of, you know, that we're all kind of species on the same planet, and you know, and also I think there's not been enough of a focus on when you fell trees, the carbon that is released as well. Because everyone sort of goes, you know, there's been a focus on what you're losing, but you're also pushing lots of carbon into the atmosphere by felling trees. You're releasing stored carbon. Joe, do you want to come in again?
Yeah, sorry, this isn't actually directed at the book, but and it's probably, I'm sure it's something he's aware of. But someone pointed it out to me yesterday that the dictionary definition of nature is basically everything except for humans. Like, so if I can just read it quickly, the phenomena of the physical world collectively, including plants, animals, the landscape, and other features and products of the earth, as opposed to humans or humans' creations. So it's not acknowledging that we are a part of nature. It's everything outside of humans. And I think that definition needs to be reassessed, because we are a part of nature. And until we make that connection, we're not going to get very far.
So interestingly, that thing came as a campaign by Lawyers for Nature.
That might be Paul why someone mentioned it to me. So
yeah. It's the We Are Nature campaign to actually change that, which has already been partially successful. The Oxford English Dictionary have now put back one of the old definitions saying that it includes humans. So yeah, that's sort of been partially successful. But yeah, but those are the kinds of things that I think go a bit deeper than just, oh, we need to change this or that regulation, which we do. But I think while doing that, I think we need to speak to the deeper issues. And that's what I always try to do whenever giving talks or doing stuff. I think that to me feels key as well.
Definitely. Ali, were you know your reverse TPO idea? Did you want to, I don't know, I'm sort of volunteering you to talk about that, but maybe that's kind of what, you know, both things can be happening at the same time, the broader kind of rights for nature kind of ethos, but also we were thinking, I know you spoke to someone at the Woodland Trust about this reverse TPO idea, and I'm not sure if Paul has heard about this.
So, yeah, it's interesting. I really like the idea of, you know, the broad brush kind of fundamental change. But I wonder whether our members, you know, whether just focusing on that would be enough for us, or whether we should try, because we've sort of considered various sort of attempts at policy change and whether that's possible, or whether it would just take years and be complete waste of time or not. But the reverse TPO idea, obviously we've spoken about before, is basically that rather than having to apply a TPO on trees, they're just on them, just on all the trees, you know, with few exceptions, obviously tiny trees and fruit trees and things like that. But so people always have to apply through planning to have them felled unless they're dying. So it's ambitious, but it might be a way of, you know, stopping so many trees disappearing. But
Yeah.
yeah, and
yeah, I mean, I've thought of that one in the past, and it is a good idea. I mean, whether it's politically feasible is another thing, and we kind of also do have something similar with the hedgerow regulations, which is kind of an automatic protection. The problem is you come down to enforcement again. It's like, who's enforcing that, and who's checking if a tree goes or whatever that is. I would say we probably want some kind of graded system, because the problem is if it's automatic protection, it's never going to be as strong as one actually applied, I think. Because so I think we probably want something like a listing system for our most precious trees, which has to be applied, but some form of protection with less stringency for all trees, effectively.
I think if people knew that trees genuinely were protected, and people who were planning on cutting them down knew that everyone else knew that, they would be more cautious. So, for example, just literally 2-minute walk from here, someone cut down loads of trees in a conservation area, and there's like a forest school right next door, and they didn't even know it was a conservation area. And had they known, they would have run over there and sort of stopped him in his tracks. But because they weren't really sure where they stood on whether it was legal or not, they just let him do it.
Yeah, I do think I think some form of water protection is necessary, but I also think we should have some forms of applied protection, because some trees need, I think, a greater protection than that which would apply to all trees. Yeah, I would say. But I think, and I would, whether you call it reverse TPO or automatic protection, I'm not quite sure.
Or like blanket TPO, we thought.
Blanket, yeah.
Joe, do you want to?
Yeah, we're just going back to the looking at Singapore again, where they have the two large. It's not the whole city, but it's two very large conservation areas where that is the default, that all trees, but it's defined above a particular girth.
Yeah,
it's quite large, but you could define that however you wanted, I guess. Are automatically protected, but then I think there's also another system on top of that for like the heritage trees. So it's all trees above like a meter or something, measured half a meter from the ground, are protected, and you have to apply to the government to have them removed. But then there's a further thing, which are like the heritage and veteran trees, the kind of special trees, have extra protection on top of that. So I think they have two systems running at the same time. So it does exist, you know, already, and that's been going for decades. I think quite a long time. That's in Singapore.
I wonder, like, I'm just wondering, like, where, sorry, Penny, I was just coming in quickly, but where does the law stand at the moment? Like, what is it, just like in terms of protection of trees, like public trees, like in parks, on streets? I'm not talking about sort of in woodlands, where maybe them as well, but is it just TPO? Is that the only protection for trees? Because I don't actually know where the law stands currently in order to know how we could maybe change it or impact on it.
Yeah, it's basically TPOs, conservation areas. That's
right.
Pretty much it.
So it's just TPOs in conservation areas.
There's also Forestry Commission, which
but they never do anything.
Well, no, they don't. I mean, I'm just saying where
and
it
they
lies,
only really act afterwards. You know, like it's.
I'm not saying they're effective. Saying they if you were to ask what protections there were, they would say that, and that's why the Forestry Commission stuff needs like massive reform. Again, ideally taking a rights of nature approach rather than a forestry. We're doing this to, at the moment, the whole forestry system is set up with wood as a resource rather than trees as something to be protected. Which is why it's something we want to change. But yeah, that's basically it. I mean, whether we'd want to go for, again, TPOs or a kind of whole new system, it would also have to deal with the difference of I think quite a big difference between street trees and woodland or other trees, you know, I chop trees down, you know, dun dun dun. I do coppicing and I do things like that which don't actually harm nature, because you're doing them in an ecosystem which can spring back. So for me, it would be ridiculous, I suppose, for me to have to go to the council to chop down a willow tree in order to plant 5 more. But equally, if there was a particular willow tree on a high street that was super beautiful and wasn't going to regenerate, that would need protection. So that is quite a difficult thing, especially as it's easier for street trees because they're not there as part of ecologies. When you start getting into woodlands or parks and things, it does get quite difficult to define the boundaries of regenerative forestry and construction, I would say.
suppose you could, you know, because you can't get TP on a tree that no one can see. So I suppose if it was out of sight, then you wouldn't get the blanket TP on it. I suppose you get around it that way.
That's something I think that is one of the main things we want to change with TPOs. The amenity test is actually a key thing that wouldn't just. I went the other week. I was at a conference about black poplars, and we went to see a 1,000-year-old oak which has zero protections, and in fact can't be protected because it's not publicly visible.
Right,
it's mad, completely mad. So I was like, I mean, luckily the landowners and National Trust, they're not going to chop it down, but if they wanted to, the landowner could chop that down and there's nothing that could be done about it. Like,
even if it was on the ancient
nope,
tree
nothing.
list.
Nope, really? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Nope. Yeah, that's the kind of that's why I think we need to have it. And you know, some I think there are a few hundred yews in this country older than 2,000 years old, many of which have zero legal protection. Zero. They can be chopped down tomorrow. Some of the oldest living trees on earth. And those are the kinds of things I think that are a really great way into the majority of the public, because it's so obviously ridiculous that I think it's a really great sell. And then we sneak in other changes for other trees around the back door. But those are the ones that you're in, because that will really resonate with people. People will be like, "What the hell? That's mad."
Yeah. Joe?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, just 2 things in response to that. The visual impact thing, giving protection, that is completely mad. And that's where we need to shift, you know, the biodiversity kind of network, recognizing that as important as anything else. But also just going back to the kind of nonsense of the conservation areas. And I think I mentioned this at a previous meeting where there was a big tree that was cut down to make way for a new parking place in a front garden. And what my side of the street is on in a conservation area, but their side isn't. So they didn't have to apply for anything. They could just do whatever they wanted to cut it down. If it had been on the other side of the street, they would have had to, you know, apply to have that removed as part of their planning. That is crazy.
Thanks. I'm just going to go to like Penny and then Christine, because Penny did have her hand up. Sorry, Penny.
Don't worry, that's fine. Yeah, just going back to the rights of nature thing, Paul, I think you do work with rivers as well. I was just wondering about this rights of rivers. It says here the declaration states that all rivers are living entities entitled to fundamental rights and entitled to legal guardians. Presumably that's something that is a parallel that, you know, could be used as a precedent. Have you been involved with rights of rivers at all?
Yeah, I have, and I know that declaration. A declaration is great, but it's not actually legal. So, you know, it's the difference between what a declaration is versus something that's actually legal. In many ways, it's an example of what could be done here, because there's nothing stopping national tree groups doing a declaration of trees and then campaigning for that. So it's about this, like, setting your sights really high on the principle, then actually working out the details of legislation needed to actually put that into effect. Yeah. So there's actually nothing stopping this group or others organising around a declaration of the rights of trees. But it's basically what we're going to do for ancient woodlands. It's basically declare they should have rights, draft a bill, and then campaign on it. So I think the advantage of those, obviously, there's a bit of a risk of it becoming a bit kind of, you know, not real. It's just like, oh, we want this thing, and it never goes anywhere. But also, I think it just stops the kind of people going, we want something to change. Like, well, what do you want? It's like, oh, here's our bill, you know? And it's just much more definitive. So when something bad goes wrong with trees, we can get those local groups to, as well as trying to save their individual trees, campaign on the wider principle, because we've got declaration there, we've got bills drafted, and we say, yes, this is a problem and this is our solution to it. Will you support that solution? Rather than just like, we don't want bad things.
Yeah, I agree with the big aspirational, idealistic, like aim really, really high and then like work out the details as you go along. I really like that idea. And I think as a group, we need to kind of try and work on a kind of manifesto together, I think. Christine, do you want to come in here?
Yeah, I mean, mine was more of a kind of technical point related to TPOs, because the thing that concerns me is that you could have a tree that's a pretty good tree, and in time it could be a great tree, but if it's not at risk, it doesn't score any risk points, and there's a lot of risk points in the assessment, so you can get something unless it's at risk, unless you know it's at risk, then it doesn't get protection. But actually what you don't know is somebody might sell that house and you don't go down that road very often, and the next time you go down the tree's gone. Or it could be a business. There's a really, really, really nice London plane in Sheffield in the grounds of the social club, using a couple of car parking spaces. It's a really, really nice tree. Not very many big trees in the area. Now, if the ownership of that social club changed, there wouldn't be a for sale sign or anything, and people might not think about it, and the next time you go, they've got 2 more car parking spaces because the tree didn't merit enough points to have protection, because so many of it is to do with risk. I think if a tree is worth protecting, it should be worth protecting, and that whole, it's, you know, not just the amenity, the condition of the tree should have more weight.
Yeah,
that's another specific part of the Woodland Trust proposal. So it's amenity value, and yeah, basically it's only where it's just inconvenient, effectively, or whatever wording it is. Just basically means if there's no threat. It's the old chicken and egg clause, which basically if there's no threat to the tree, they won't grant a TPO. But then by the time the threats manifest, the tree's gone. They're 2 specific things the Woodland Trust wants to change, I think, and that we should definitely get behind. Yeah, I mean, I think there's basically a really obvious. I think they may have already have a bill to change those, but if not, we can definitely take theirs and tweak it or whatever to do those specific changes. I think that's definitely a good idea, because there are specific things that can be done, but also, as I say, I think it'd be great if we could align those specific things to more idealistic things as well.
yeah,
But yeah, there's all of these basically, which should just really obvious things to incorporate into a proposed legal change to campaign for. Because we all know a lot of the problems.
yeah. Ali, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I just want to say that the blanket TPO would absolutely solve that problem, because if someone then wanted to cut it down, you'd see a planning application, you know, on the planning portal. But you know, this is the problem, is that you end up waiting till they're at risk. Sometimes even if they are at risk, council say they're not at risk. The TPO report for our tree, which was done about 3 months before they cut the trees down, said they were no longer at risk because they had paused the project. You know, they were always at risk, but you know, we don't want to wait until they're at risk, because then you've got to get everyone together and start a campaign, and you don't know what you're doing, and blah blah blah. So that's why the blanket TPO thing would be really good. And you know, we've discussed this, you know, before, haven't we? But making it realistic. I know the Andy Egan from the Woodland Trust said that he would back us if we, you know, put a proposal together. And now I've got a friend who's an arborist, and he thinks it's a good idea as well. So I think if you can get support from all sides, you know, it is aiming high, and you know, you might aim really, really high, and then get knocked down to something that's possible. But you know, I think that's that, isn't it? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose as a group, we don't quite know how to get started on some of these things, do we? We're trying to work it out. Like, who do we align? Do we partner with? Like, do we try and get the Woodland Trust on board? But the impression I got, they're doing a lot of their own projects and trying to lobby for their own kind of changes in the laws. Or do we try and partner with someone else? Or, you know, that's the kind of advice I think I'd welcome. Like how do you get this kind of thing going, you know, if you're a new group? And I mean, hopefully we can do a little bit at the AP, you know, the all parliamentary party group on trees. Hopefully we'll be able to attend one of those at some point. I think Hannah, who's got her camera off at the moment, is trying to get that sorted. But yeah, I mean, there's a tree just going on the whole TPO thing. I'm in a conservation area, as you know, where the Oakfield plane tree is still standing at the moment. And there's an amazing oak tree hidden in an estate, and it's not that visible from the road. It is though, but not that, you know. And I've been asking for a TPO for it for about 2 years. I found out I didn't have a TPO. It's a magnificent oak tree. It's probably about 150 years old, maybe 200. One of the most beautiful trees I've seen in our area. And I kept asking our tree manager, and he kept saying, no, there's no need. It's public land, council land, we'll be fine. And then obviously last year I found out there's an insurance claim on it, and I think probably he knew about it. But that's me being cynical. But so now it's in that death spiral, you know, the insurance claim death spiral, and it's being trimmed back quite regularly, and it's really depressing. But obviously the thing is with TPOs, they can be taken off and on very quick. That's the thing we found in Highgate, the lime trees at Townsend Yard, which was this horrible developer is you know, building these kind of £1 million, you know, sort of houses, and right up against this grade listed cottage, and the TPOs, they just took them off, and then they put them back on again, and then I think they come on, I don't know, so they can take them on and off quite. So what we want is a TPO system that was quite robust, you know, actually robustly applied and enforced. As I think Paul was saying, you know, you've got to enforce this stuff, you know, and as we know from the Environment Agency, it's like they knew about all that stuff being dumped in that wood for almost a year, and they just didn't enforce any. Yeah, anyway, I'm waffling slightly, but I really like the idea of reverse.
Yeah, that's the issue, is that had SSSI protection, so the highest protection, but nothing. And I do think there is a tactical trade-off between number of trees protected and the security of the protection they're given. So yeah, I think some kind of blanket protection for all trees of a significant size or age would be great, but I also think on top of that we should have specific protections for, you know, trees of particular importance.
Yeah. Some other questions or points or issues?
I just realized that I've got 10% battery left, so I probably only do have about 10 more minutes.
Okay, no worries. What would you recommend we do, like next steps? Sorry, I will come to Lucy and Penny, sorry, but in terms of like, I mean, would you want to work, I mean, could we work together on something, or are you working with the Woodland Trust? I wasn't quite sure.
Yeah, no, I'm very happy to work with you. In order to do that as paid, it has to be through a rights of nature lens. But as I said before, all of these proposals we can just put through a kind of rights of nature lens, I think. There's no reason we can't, and I think that would make it stronger. And yeah, I'm happy to work. The key thing I think we need to do is find out what the existing proposals are, because I know that the Woodland Trust tried to put through a bill about strengthening TPOs, and they're also trying to do something in Northern Ireland as well that I saw. And there's also the listed trees bill that I've drafted for them. So I think finding out what the existing proposals are on the table, we can also do by the next meeting. We might also have our woodlands, ancient woodland rights one there as well. So finding out what's already on the table, and then basically working out what, if anything, we want to add and how we want to campaign for those would be good.
Right. So you mean with the Woodland Trust, what's already on the table, what's being proposed?
Yeah, and we can always just copy what they're asking for. I just think it'd be useful. I mean, I can go and draft a TPO reform bill, but I'm pretty sure the Woodland Trust have already done something along those lines.
Right, that we could kind of steal.
Yeah, or work with them with. I do think that if we can, we don't have to go hook, line, sinker, but if we can work with them on at least some proposals, I think that would be worthwhile, because they do bring a lot of kudos. And I think as a group of individuals, we struggle to get that kind of access to government ministers. And to be fair, I think the Woodland Trust, they are a mainstream NGO, but of mainstream NGOs, I've always found them to be very pretty good and pretty open to working with, or ordinary campaigners and amplifying those voices. So yeah, I can speak to Adam Cormack, who I think was maybe on this last meeting actually, wasn't he?
Yeah, Adam's
and
great. I know that Bridget was a little, she said we're too busy and we're understaffed and we can't really work with local community groups, but seems like you've got some ins there and you've probably got some influence, and Adam's great, so maybe we can keep working together on, with him a little bit. Because I know that, yeah, they don't normally work with grassroots community groups as much, I don't think, but it would be great to do something with them.
Yeah, or we can just keep them, abreast of what we're up to, or support their campaigns where they overlap with ours, something like that. So
yeah, sure. And Lucy and Penny, do you want to? I don't know who was first, but do you want to just come in? Lucy, do you want to, or Penny, do you want to start?
Yeah, it was just about where the decision making and the power lies to make the TPO decisions compared to the Forestry Commission. I mean, is there anything in it being more centralised so that people can be held to account more easily? Is too much power residing with local authorities where there's a clear conflict of interest very often?
I mean, definitely. I described them as the fox garden in the hen house, and it's a very apt description. For the listed trees bill, the idea was to take, like with buildings, to take the actual decision on listing away from the local council. So it's done by the Secretary of State, I think, via English Heritage. So like local authorities don't get to decide what buildings in their local area are listed. And it doesn't make sense why they get to do that with trees necessarily. There should be like a tree body that actually understands them and can apply a uniform national standard, and also apply it to buildings that, trees that the council themselves own, as they would for buildings. It'd be like a council owns this beautiful old manor house, but they don't want it to be listed because they wanted to knock it down. So they just don't list it. That doesn't happen. English Heritage decides that's due to be listed, and the Secretary of State makes a decision, right? So that's kind of what we want to head for, I think, with trees. Like local authorities doing it is just not providing a uniform national standard, and is allowing, I think, some quite bad behaviour.
That's such a brilliant point, actually. I always think there should be an independent body assessing how trees are treated, and maybe a political party that's tree focused. Like I've often thought like the Tree Party or the London Tree Party would be quite a good, like maybe not London, it's too south centric, but you could have a political party that whole remit is just trees, looking after trees, like monitoring what's going on in different places in the country, how councils are. But yeah, I think that's great. That's the vibe I get from our tree department, our council, that they're the fox in the hen house.
I can also share the what I'll do is if you have to be a reminder for me this, Gio, because I sometimes forget to do things, but nag me to send the existing Living Legend stuff in the Woodland Trust, my bill, and any of the TPO stuff that I've already seen, and we can then know what's being proposed and what we might want to add on top of that. Does that sound like a good way forward?
Yeah, so Living Legend, TPO stuff, and what was the other thing?
And my bill, the listed trees bill.
Okay. Do you really want me to nag you in an Italian style? Like, shall I really, really pester you?
Is that racist? I don't know. Maybe that's racist.
No. I could go proper Italian on you if you want. Every morning, every day.
Oh no, nothing like that.
Okay.
Like a gentle English nagging.
Okay, I'll do my English side. Penny, sorry. Oh no, Lucy, sorry.
Well, no, it was just that I was aware of the time that Joe's going, and Ali said it'd be quite good to think about the strap line for Canopy before Joe goes. But I don't know if we finished talking about this, or perhaps we can come back to this.
I think that's quite a good point. I'm probably going to get, my battery's probably going to go down in a minute anyway, so I might take my leave anyway. So yeah, I think that's a good point to come to. So let's work out what's already out there in terms of proposals, and then next step is to work out what, if anything, we want to add to those and how we want to put it into a kind of coherent campaign that we can all get behind, I guess.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds fab.
Cool.
Thank you so much for coming along.
No worries. Nice to see you all.
Take care.
I'll get back to my ditch. I'll just show you my work today. So this is quite cool. I know. So basically, there's an old dry ditch that connected the old East Ham marshes there to the marshes over here, and I've been digging it out. So this was dry at the start, and now the water's slowly making its way down.
Oh
See?
my God, wow.
I know. I can
Like
love a
a
bit of
kid on the
practical.
beach.
Yeah, but like actually with a genuine ecological potential. This is the first time this area's got water in probably decades. So
Wow.
yeah, it's kind of cool. Interesting to
Let's
see
hope
what
it keeps raining
arises.
a little bit and we won't go into a horrific drought for another 3
I
months.
know.
We
I
need more
know,
rain.
exactly. I know.
But that's fantastic. Yeah, and I
Okay.
must go down and see this thing.
Yeah, come and see my tree babies on the roading.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Thanks so
Okay.
much. Lovely to
Nice
see you.
to see
Take
you all.
care. Thank
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
you. Okay.
Right, we've got 6 minutes. Come
Yeah,
up to
okay, I'm going to
the
share
strap
my
line.
screen. So strap lines, right? It's very
Right.
simple.
So yes.
Yeah.
Do you want me to do it? So basically, lots were suggested, and lots had a very, very similar theme. And they were the national, insert word here, one of those 5, of tree, insert word here. So if everybody can write in the chat 1 word from this top list and 1 word from this second list, we will have, as if by magic, our strap line. That make sense? So, for example, you might like best the National Alliance of Tree Campaigners.
National network.
What is that? Does everyone understand? Very, very subdued response to this.
So I should really have put numbers next to. Are you just going to count up what people say? So you could either have the national.
We could do numbers, or we could just tot up. I mean, it's not going to be. There's only like how many of us here? 10.
So it could either be the National Alliance of Tree Protectors or the National Coalition of. Yeah. Anyway, a combination of one or the other.
Right.
I'm really confused now.
So just scribble them in, and later on I'll save the chat and I will determine the best. Okay.
Okay.
And I expect to see 10 in there, please. Can it be strict?
It's copying Lucy's one.
I don't even know which one I like best.
I mean, I think campaigners, sorry, I don't mean to influence, but campaigners encompasses sort of everything in a way. But anyway,
yeah,
it's up to the vote. It's up to the vote.
Cool. Thank you, everybody. I'll add them up later and I'll let you know the results in an email.
Okay, that's great.
That was easy, isn't it? It took like 2 minutes.
Yeah, that's great. So, yeah. Brilliant. Okay, now I did have a sort of very sort of casual agenda. Did anything crop up from what Paul said? It was quite interesting, I thought. I like this idea of sort of, did anyone have any thoughts post Paul having left the room kind of thing? Anything at all? Kind of.
I really like the idea of looking at all the different proposals he mentioned. So maybe Gia, once you get them off him, or if anyone finds anything else being proposed by anybody else, we could
share them.
Some sort of resourcey share drive thing, and then we need to find out where the gaps are, I suppose, and that's where we need to.
Yeah.
Lucy? I was really surprised when he said that hedgerows have this protection, but most people, I mean, probably the local authority knows about it but doesn't care. I'm just good. I mean, because with this hedgerow down in Stationers Park was all taken down for this tennis court, and I think I just didn't know that hedgerows had this protection. Did anyone else know that?
No, I mean, it was interesting he said that because hedgerows are so under threat. I think we've lost something like half of them since the war, I don't know.
I think thinking about it,
yeah,
it has to tick various hedgerow boxes. So it has to be, I think, in order to be covered, it has to have, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it has to have like so many different species in it, and there's like some. It can't just be like a hedge, you know. It has to be a good hedge.
Full of biodiversity.
Yeah, I think it's linked in with it's sort of like what makes it an ancient hedge. So there's tons in Devon. We are hedge rich down here, and I think it's not just like literally any old hedge. It's got to.
Yeah, it's got to have lots of. I mean, I know there was a consultation by DEFRA recently on the hedges. I don't know if you fed back on that. That was quite interesting, and in the Lake District, DEFRA put out at the same time as saying, oh, we've got to plant more hedges and hedgerows, they were giving out a fencing grant. So we found where my mum lives in Lawton, which is like North Lakes, there were farmers and landowners had been ripping out trees and old hedgerows because they got this fencing grant, and they were putting this vile sort of fencing, which seemed completely sort of insane, kind of like irrational, kind of, anyway.
You get an extra like 1 meter of your field if you've got a fence instead of something.
So we saw this everywhere. We saw like in my mum's area. Okie doke. I thought, should we just have a quick sort of update from if there are different groups here? Oh, Joe, I know you've got to go. Did you?
I've got to go as well, I'm afraid.
Okay, no worries.
But great to see you all, and thanks so much. And I look forward to seeing the recording of the rest of the meeting.
Yeah, sure, definitely. I'll send it to everyone.
Oh, Gia, don't forget, we have decided, just to make life easier in the future, that the meetings from now on will be first Wednesday of every month at the same time.
Great.
Does that sound okay? First Wednesday of every month. So only a month, every month, but the first Wednesday, is that?
The next one will be a bit sooner than a month away, but then it will be easy after that.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. Yeah, no, that's great. So I look forward to seeing you in 3 weeks, whenever it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thanks, Joe. And the other thing we were thinking was we were going to get different groups to like host, like rather than it always being me or Ali, like it would be just lovely so we'd also find out about other people's groups and areas, and just they could get their own, local experts in, or people they consult with. We just thought that'd be a really nice way doing it, because we are a coalition we're not just, no one's kind of, in charge. We're a coalition of groups. So I thought that might be quite a nice way. So
we also decided that if no one volunteers, we are going to pick on groups. So no getting out of it.
Yeah. So it might be a good opportunity for, like, if you're the only person who tends to come along in your group, get someone else to come along and go, hang on, you've got to help me out on this one this week, this month.
Yeah. So all the groups signed up to the Canopy website. How many is it, Marky? 20? 20 or 30. We can just pick one out of a hat and tell them they're doing.
Exactly. So for example, Julie's going to do like next month in June, with the Essex group.
Very quiet.
That was just an example, but if you want to do it, I'm happy. Be very, because you've got your Chester campaign going on, and that's really, then maybe Penny wants to do it, but you're Plymouth as well. I don't know if you operate separately. And then like Julian might want to.
He's my boss.
Julian might want to do it 1 month with the Lee Valley, and then obviously Christine with Sheffield. I don't know, just be quite a nice way to like, just like spread the load a bit as well. Yeah, so different groups to host. We voted on the strap line. We've locked in the date for the meeting. We've spoken to Paul. Should we do just a few updates? And then we were thinking about strategy and other working groups. The idea is, I guess we're starting that process with kind of looking with Paul at what's currently on the proposal table. And then, that hopefully will start, if someone's really interested in getting, like, becoming part of a working group, a strategy working group, rather than the whole group meeting each time, we could sort of meet every now and again separately and, try and thrash some, because there's so many experts in this group. Obviously, Christine has huge, campaign history in Sheffield, and then we've got other everyone's got expertise, and it's just trying to sort of pull those kind of resources. Obviously, we're a much younger group, the Haringey Tree Protectors, and I know Ali's the last 2 years has done great things, but it's really nice to have groups who are more established and older. They've gone through a lot of stuff to give us advice. And I know Bristol also, you know, have they're quite, you know, they've been running for like 15 years and they've got a lot of expertise as well. So we want to sort of get all that kind of being fed into our, Anyway, should we do a few little updates? Because I know Judy with Chester, this wonderful huge plane tree in the centre, the shopping centre at which shopping centre is it?
No, it's behind the shopping centre. It's there's a bus station,
Right.
and it's right in the bus station, right at the back. It's the only one that's left. They've taken all the rest and built on there. And it's the only one standing there, which is why it needs to stay, because it's the last one. It's the only one in the area. So
What's the town again? Sorry,
Southend-on-Sea.
And it's Southend, yeah.
Yeah.
So how's it going, the campaign? You sort of said a bit at the beginning, but
well, like I said, I mean, you're aware of the Holt Farm one, aren't you?
Yeah.
We lost the Holt Farm, and the people from the Holt Farm is more or less what's came over to help with the Chester one in Southend, because really the Southend Tree Action Group I've formed, people have sort of like come along, and we've been sort of working together, but we're more like XR rebels more than anything. And like I said, we started doing demonstrations outside the council. We did a march from Chester all the way through the high street. I think there was about 80 people that came, which was a really good one. But that's when it's sort of like all fell apart, because then you've got egos that are all jumping in and claiming Chester as theirs. And this is where it's all gone, from my perspective, a bit tits up, really.
So so this guy came in and tried to sort of take over a bit, is that right?
Yeah, well, what it is right. Originally, it started with Holt Farm. Then we had, that was 64 TPO trees in Shoebury, which Tim was supposed to be managing because that was his area. So I've then gone in with my lot and the Holt Farm lot to do protesting on his patch. But then he started becoming a bit controlling, and then what happened is I've sort of like, Chester's come along, so then we started doing protesting outside with Chester, and then Tim's jumped on to taking control of that as well, and then he's invited in from the last March an arborist.
Right.
So he had conversations with this arborist. Can he do a tempo? Can he do a cravat and all the rest of it? And he's been working with that without talking to me or anybody else. So
what's a tempo? Sorry.
A tempo is it's a form that you fill out to be able to get a tree preservation order.
Right, okay.
But this guy, although he's an ARB, he's never heard of one, he's never seen one and never done one, and he's never done a cravat either. But Tim's asked him to do it.
He's definitely an arborist. He doesn't sound like an arborist.
This is setting my alarm bells off.
Yeah, you've got to be careful because there are plants that come in.
And this is what we was wondering, whether or not he was a plant that was coming in.
Yeah.
Because everything he was saying, he was backpedaling on it, you know, and all of a sudden, I've got no control of anything. Him and Tim have gone off and started doing stuff. So
right. How's the council? Sorry, just to interrupt. I don't mean to interrupt. Sorry, but what's happening with the council? Like, how are they responding? Are they have they paused because wasn't it due to be felled? Like,
well, what's happened is the council's not actually talking or discussing with me, but we've got a Green councillor that obviously, because I'm Green Party as well, I'm a candidate for a different area. So he's put in a motion for all the trees in Southend,
right,
like a working party, so that, you know, it's not just, you know, the what do you call it, the council that's looking at the trees. There are other people that can have their say with it. This is what he's proposed to put the motion in, and there's also a motion to have the layout changed so that they can change from a 3-lane to a 2-lane and extend the pavement so it's not dangerous, so pedestrians can walk round Chester.
Right.
So that was deferred pending this other motion that's been put in. And then what's happened in the meanwhile is obviously the elections.
Yeah.
So what they've done is because the administration was Tory, they wouldn't pass anything. They kept deferring it and installing it.
Right. So who's the new administration? Is it Labour?
Well, this is the thing, is it was only discussed yesterday that Labour and the Lib Dems and I think a couple of independents are forming a coalition to take control of the administration. So that leaves us in a bit of a quandary, because the motions that have been put in, does that null and void them, you know? And obviously Richard, who's sort of like going on about, oh, we need to join an alliance with them, we need to join their coalition, because he was panicking, thinking they're going to take Chester, they're going to throw my motion out, they're not going to look at it and all the rest of it.
Okay. I'm just it sounds complex. How can we support you? Signing the petition, or this is
the thing. We've had several petitions. We've had the major one on change.org, which the council won't recognise. They don't recognise anything. They just look at it. So we're still collecting petitions, and then we collected another one recently for the road layout. Katie, who I've been working with, who's part of Stag, she's also sided with Tim and this ARB.
Oh God, it sounds like politics is coming into it. We can talk. I mean, I'm happy to talk. I'm just sort of aware of the rest of the group, but
yeah, it is very complicated.
It sounds like it's becoming really tense and challenging. I know exactly how that feels. What I was going to say was, our council with petitions, so this is a general point, if we can submit change.org petitions, but it has to be a certain number of the signatories have to be the borough, have to come from the borough. So basically it used to be 2,000, they sneakily changed it. It used to be 2,300 signatures had to be borough residents, you know. So even if you have 60,000 people who've signed your petition on change.org, it's only the borough residents that will be counted. And now they put it up to 2,600. So it's probably worth you asking, like they normally boroughs will accept a certain amount of signatures, or even on those, you know, those bigger petitions, you know, because they should really democratically accept, if local residents have signed it, they should really accept that.
As a result of our successful petition, the council passed a motion to stop accepting ones from third-party websites. Make it harder.
Yeah, Chester do have a petition website. I just put up a thing. They say they accept one from 100 signatories.
Yeah, so there's various different things that they'll do depending on how many people signed it. But I believe the reason that they have stopped accepting ones from third-party websites, they say it's for admin reasons, or because they need to prove who's who and what's what. But actually, third-party ones, you've all got to put your postcode and they've got to verify them, all that. I believe it's because what we did with ours, when you get signatories on something like Change, or we use Some of Us, you then got access to email all of those people. So essentially, I had a mailing list of like 10,000 people I could write to. And then what you do is you write to everyone, go, oh, would you mind giving us some money? And then you use the money to carry on advertising on Facebook locally. So you get those local signatures, and then that just keeps going and going. If the council control the petitions, it means that you can't contact your signatories, and that's where they do it. So I wouldn't even bother doing one on a council website. For, you know, I know that's all we can do now in Plymouth.
But they say in Chester that they accepted after 100 signatories. I've just posted the link. So it's not after any.
30,000 on the change.org.
No, I understand. I understand. But if you want to get them to pay attention to your petition, it looks like you do have to do it on their website. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
We're doing one for a group in Waltham Forest about a project which we're arguing about. They very seldom get very many on that. And we have over 3,000 signatures now. Some of them are not genuine because of the website not working properly. So there's a problem with them being recognised, but we're arguing with them to say they have to accept it. But they will have to accept it once it's got beyond the number of recognised signatories. So all I'm saying is, if you want to get a debate with the council, you have to use their site. That's all, and they do have a site.
We've used their site before with Tim's 64 TPO trees. People can't access it. He only got something like 20 signatures. Their system is absolute rubbish, and even I couldn't get through to sign a petition on their e-petitions.
Yeah,
I don't know if they do that deliberately.
And also, I don't think people would trust. Trust is so low. I wouldn't sign a petition on the council website.
No,
Right.
no.
Just going to bring Penny in.
I was just thinking a way around it might be to put something in the petition itself to explain about the council trying to control it, and sign the petition here, but also come over to this website and sign it here so we can stay in touch with you, or something like that.
Well, like I said, we've got the 30,000, and we've got some hand ones where we was in the high street and we was getting people to write on paper. So we've got about 5 different petitions going at the moment. And obviously the 30,000 one's been submitted with, I think it's with the tempo for the tree preservation order, but we're just waiting for that because they keep deferring everything.
Yeah.
So
well, look, it's frustrating. Just I don't know. Let's hope that things align and somehow, it sounds like a really tough situation. Have you been in touch with the Woodland Trust at all about this tree? How old is Chester? Is he 200 years old?
He's 150. I did email Adam, but I never got anything back. I don't know if I got the wrong email. You did give me an email and I've messaged him, but nothing's come back.
He's quite busy. You have to pester him a little bit, do that pestering thing, but he is quite busy. Just to highlight, I know Christine put a couple of things which I'm aware of. Obviously the Urban Tree Festival's happening starting this weekend, and obviously and Ali's doing a lot in Plymouth. She's organising the whole thing down there. There's also this Tree People Day, which they got in touch with me actually on the 12th of June. I'm not sure if I can attend, but it's in Birmingham. Is anyone here going to go to that? You're going to go, Christine? Yeah.
When is it?
It's I'll just share the screen. It's a tree people network day. It's on the 12th of June on Wednesday. I'm not sure work-wise that I can attend. It's at the Exchange in Birmingham, and it's all day, and I think they're trying to get sort of groups together, tree groups, and I don't know what the workshops are about. Maybe it has more. Russell Hawes is going to be there.
Something it says
is it more about tree planting than saving?
I think it might possibly. It's organised by Trees for Cities and Birmingham Tree People, which does sound like a sort of plant, a bit like. But I guess it might be quite useful for sort of networking with who's.
I thought Russell was into planting more.
Yeah, it does also say about something where it says through listening workshops we'll explore what existing groups want and need, what councils and other support organisations already provide, what the gaps are, and whether a national network would help further the work of community groups. So they're wanting a national network of tree planters. So
right.
Yeah, it's like what's their aims? And we end up like Siamese fighting fish,
Yeah, exactly. I thought when I looked at it, it does seem a bit more like there's so much tree planting going on, which is great, but also it's not really I suppose it is some of our remit, but not all of it. It's some of our, Russell Horsey. How well do people know Russell? Because he came to visit me, and one of my friends is an ecology lead. And I don't mean to be gossipy, but I found him I found him quite more establishment than I thought he was going to be, actually. I thought he was more aligned, because obviously he works with councils and organisations all the time. And I know he's very well thought of, and he was fine, but I found him a little less radical than I was hoping he was going to be, actually.
I think everyone is a little less radical than you like them to be.
Yeah, that is true, actually.
Go on, Julie.
I was going to say, I met Russell at the tree convention in Sheffield right at the very beginning. And he came from Essex County Council, and he left Essex County Council, and that's when he started his own tree stuff with his planting. He seemed very helpful, and he did say that a lot of our issues in Southend was when Southend Council became unitary and moved away from Essex County Council, and they lost all the documentation. So a lot of the trees weren't covered under the insurance.
Right. Okay, that's interesting. Christine, what were you going to say?
Well, I mean, one thing is he's built this software called Tree Plotter, which is like a mapping thing. So he's more establishment in the way that he's got to be fairly chummy with councils, because his living now depends on actually selling this software to them.
Yeah.
But I mean, he's good because he talks engineer, because he was successful when he was a tree officer working for the council, and in actually going to engineers and shops and things, and actually basically saying things like, well, do you know you'll make more money if you've got planters with trees outside your shops, because you get higher footfall. And engineers were saying things like, oh, we don't want trees down the middle because it'll be dangerous and people hit them. And he's saying, well, research says if you've got a line of trees down the middle, people slow down.
Absolutely.
So he knew those sorts of things, and he was quite forthright in his own job. If somebody wanted a tree down, because quite often somebody wants a tree down, and they're like, and the council's mumbling in the house. He'd never let anybody, and even if a utility company wants to cut a tree down, they don't cut it down until they get the value off him, and then he'll plant another one. So he's quite good at that.
Yeah.
How to talk engineer to engineers.
Yeah, no, he's definitely, I mean, he's worth sort of keeping, a good connection with, I suppose. I mean, we took him to see a willow tree that had been felled for a tennis court refurb, because they renovated lots of tennis courts in Haringey, and they basically just felled loads of trees around the tennis courts to give more visibility to the product that they wanted to. And they denied it, of course, and said it was dangerous, which it wasn't. And I did take him to see that tree, the stump of it. They'd left and he said, yeah, it looked fine. It didn't have to, but he wouldn't come out and directly, sort of say it, because in an official way,
Yeah.
So, but, you can't, I don't know. He was fine. He was good. He knows his stuff. It's just, I suppose you've got to nurture these relationships, and
you're better with someone like Jeremy Barrell if you want a straight opinion on.
I've tried to get him, because he's really honest. Like in that webinar, he says, I feel really guilty about things I've done in the past. I'm just trying to find this interesting email that I got about, there was a tree near us that was again threatened with an insurance claim, and it was a report from, I think, some engineers, but there were some interesting carbon values. Oh God, 1 minute, I can't find it, which is really annoying. But just anyway, would someone else like to talk? I've just got to find this email. Would someone else like to raise any particular issues? Julian, would you like to tell us what's going on in Lee Valley and Waltham Forest? What's going on with your group?
We don't really have any particular issues at the moment. We've got a whole lot of planning issues, which will be significant in the future. But at the moment, we have a massive development called New Spitalfields, which Waltham Forest put up in the middle of the Lee Valley. right next door to the River Lee, and it's a very, to my mind anyway, a very dangerous place to build in a climate emergency. It's an enormous project, around about 8,000 people, including tower blocks and everything. It doesn't actually have any particular impacts on trees directly. It will have an impact on Hackney Marshes and a smink along the side of the River Lee. Otherwise, we just have every now and then, like the same as other people. There was Lidl or Aldi, I can't remember which, suddenly decided to cut down some trees in Lee Bridge Road, and there was an immediate reaction from people living nearby, and they were kind of it did stop, but they had cut some down. But people reacted, so there was a response. But we don't really have a specific tree campaign in our area. I think I've said before, we're more concerned about general development and the impact of these Waltham Forest is building an enormous amount of housing in the South Borough, which is also the most overcrowded and deprived part of the borough anyway. So anyway, so that's basically it.
No, thank you. I mean, they're doing an incredible amount of building around that area, and I remember I went to a sort of an event with Russell Miller, you know, the guy, the ARB, and he said that he'd somewhere on Lee Valley, he'd sort of they chopped down 100 trees for some sort of pipe from Thames Water. Did you know about that?
They cut down some trees recently because they have a pipe in the what's it called? There's a wood at the south end of Marshes, and the pipe is the Thames Water. It was agreed by Hackney Council that this pipe was in danger, so they had to protect this line of trees. Sorry, they had to protect the pipe, and so they had to coppice or cut down trees along that line. That's all been done. I mean, we went to a meeting about it. Yes.
They mature trees? Were they very old?
No, they're not very old. This was a wood that was created, I don't know, maybe about 20, 25 years ago, something like that. It was a piece of open ground, and then they planted trees there.
Yeah.
They have a lot of problems with people having parties in there.
Yeah. No, he said that he seemed quite, I was quite astonished that he admitted they chopped down 100 trees.
It was 100. I don't know if it was 100. I mean, there was a long line of trees. I mean, I did go to the meeting, but it was some time ago.
Okay, don't worry. I found the thing that I was going to show you. Now, this is from an insurance claim report. Although Paul said that we're mainly about insurance claims, we're not. That's just one bit of what we do. But this was quite interesting from a tree that is threatened or was threatened by an insurance claim. And this came from Optera, which I think is an engineering or the surveying company. But it came up with some, it advised that they used a root protector. And the reason it was talking about carbon emissions. And I thought this was quite useful, and you may know this anyway, but I just thought it was quite useful to have it like this. But the average underpinning scheme emits 12 tons of CO2. The average piled raft scheme, I don't know what a piled raft scheme is, omits 44 tons of CO2. PU injection, which I think is a resin, is it? I'm not quite sure, maybe that's cement. Treatment emits 3 tons of carbon. By contrast, a 10-meter root barrier emits just 1 ton of carbon of CO2. Not only is the root barrier installation both less disruptive and much quicker to install than traditional engineered techniques, but it offers carbon savings of between 88 and 95% and is still 67% more carbon friendly than our closest innovative competitor. So this was a report that they gave Aviva, that horrific insurer. There's so many claims for Aviva in our area, but I thought that was quite interesting, that maybe there's a slight, you know, if I'm not quite sure who Optera are. I think they're advising Aviva, but just looking at the CO2, you know, it's quite useful to know that actually if they did bother to install things like root barriers, etc., or do resin injection under houses rather than just chop down trees. Yeah, that's quite useful to know that, you know, you're emitting a hell of a lot more carbon. I mean, the insurers were saying to us, oh, concrete, you know, if we use concrete underpinning, that's more carbon than chopping down a tree. That's one of the arguments they use now, by the way, one of their sort of greenwashy kind of, I mean, to be honest, I don't know, but I don't know exactly, but I imagine, you know, the tree is going to have a much longer kind of, it's going to be giving for many, many years, whereas the concrete is going to be one instant where you just, I don't know. Anyway, I thought that was quite interesting just to see those calculations there, though. Lucy, did you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I
think
think it's brilliant. I remember sort of raising this thing with Mike Carter, that's a local councillor, and saying about root barriers, couldn't we have root barriers? And he made his whole thing about how, oh, it's so disruptive of all the pipes and it's far too awkward and you can't possibly do it. So he had all these pathetic excuses, I think, before he even investigated it.
And do you remember when Paul was saying the fox in the hen house, the local council? So if you think about our tree department, they really are, they're lazy, complacent, defensive, and they're a weird combination of kind of can't be asked, but also very defensive and incompetent. And I always get that vibe that they just can't be asked to do the slightly harder thing. And, you know, this is quite useful, this info, because you think, well, actually, that's going to be the least disruptive thing. Yeah, it was telecommunication wires as well, you know, and that was the
that was it. Yes, that was it. Wasn't just pipes, telecommunication. Yeah, they said that was really difficult. You can't.
So difficult to do,
you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's become a statutory body now, you know, because we had strategy away day yesterday, and there was somebody from Virgin Media, and he was saying it used to be that, you know, sewage and water and gas and electricity were your essential functions, and they've got a statutory right to access their equipment so you can plant trees. There's nothing legally to stop you from planting a line over their equipment, but then they've got a statutory right to access it in the event of a fault. So there's nothing to stop them then chopping it down. But he was saying, well, what everyone needs Wi-Fi now, so Wi-Fi is now an essential service. So now we've got another thing going in the pavement where, you know, regulations mean you can't plant over it because it might be too shallow. So the trees, you've got things like the yard manager was sat next to me, and he's saying, well, there's issues like, he said, well, I wouldn't want my lads to be digging over a high voltage electric cable or a high pressure gas main because it's not safe for them. So there's that aspect of it. But then even if you actually plant a tree on top of it, then if there's a fault, the company's got a legal right to rip it up. So there's a whole thing with utilities. There's a whole thing about the way that they have all these standards about what they do, but they're only guidance. There's no legislation associated with how utilities use things like root protection area. And then there seems to be there's people going, oh, we follow all these standards, and then the bloke on the ground, like, he has no instructions whatsoever apart from to get this pipe in, so he just chops through everything in the way. So there's a lot of different things going on in utilities, and it is a real risk, whether it's a wire where they'll just lop branches off that are in the way, or whether it's going something, you know, something either through the roots or by the time they put it in, you can't plant on top.
I think the rights of trees would be important here, you know.
Yes.
because in a way you think, well, the trees around my area, probably in Sheffield as well, were planted at the same time as a lot of the Victorian Edwardian houses, you know, and in a way it's like, well, they should have the same rights in a way, you know, and then the wires should come in, have the least rights because they're the last things in, you know. You sort of feel like, yeah, again, very human centric sort of focus. Julian, you said something before. What did you say? Sorry, you
I'm just wondering if you had that link up to the
what I'll do is I'll share it. I'm trying to verify it exactly. I think it came off a report on a planning application, and I'm trying to just get the original source type.
If you're putting in a platform, well, they talk about a piled, what do you call it? Means you drill in, put in your concrete posts, and then you put a platform on top. That's what the piled thing was.
Right. Okay.
Really,
Yeah.
you build a whole house on top of it, or block, or whatever.
Oh, okay.
I just found the Woodlands, Wick Woodlands site where they cut down the trees. They say it was 80 trees. It was, I have to say, it's one of those things where the council and Thames Water had already agreed. Basically, people were invited along here what they were going to do. There was no argument. There was no situation in which there was any discussion about maybe this can be avoided. Essentially, it had been decided. So, I mean, I can't remember whether Russell was particularly involved in this, but I mean, Russ does a lot of stuff around Hackney Marshes and so on. I think he's moved a bit further north actually these days.
Yeah.
He's involved with Tree Musketeers and people like that. If you may know of, I don't know.
Yeah.
The other thing in our area is, you may have heard of, this thing called the East London Waterworks Park. I know this is a very local topic, but when I was talking about this petition, we are arguing that this former Thames Water depot site, which is mainly concreted, should be rewilded. And there's now an alternative proposal. And we put forward not me, because I'm not actually in it, but there is a petition to the Waltham Forest on their website. So I'm not trying to argue other people should do the same thing, but if you get a certain number, they have to hold a debate. So we are using that as a route to argue that. And it is involved rewilding and an argument about how that site should be changed. But there's an alternative project to build a secure school on it. So anyway.
Sounds good. Really interesting. Do keep us posted about these sort of projects, because we are really good. Ali, what do you think? What else should we be talking about? Because
turn that on, that helps. We wanted to talk about, because we've had a few meetings now and we keep talking about the same things over and over again, which is lovely, but it would be nice if we had some little breakaway groups, and maybe, you know, you could have your own Zooms, or maybe just like email conversations among you to try and move some things forward that could then end up on the website, you know. So basically resources for future campaigns, so they haven't got to do all the learning that we've all had to do. And I thought of some headlines for those groups, but I think they will probably evolve. You know, maybe these could be starting points, and obviously if you have better ideas then do say, but or it might be that they might evolve into something else, or they might split into two if it's too broad a topic. But I thought, so largely we've got resources for new campaigners, and I don't think there's anyone from Bristol here today, but they had that great flow chart. So I guess there's kind of like urgent resources, aren't there? You know, like you've just found out a tree's going to be cut down tomorrow. So you want to know how do you apply for an emergency TPO, who owns a tree, what can you do, blah, blah, blah. And then you've got the whole like laws on direct action side, which I think probably Julie and maybe like Sheffield people would know a lot about, and I suspect Paul could help with that as well. So resources wise, that's kind of two prongs, like direct action and the law. And then we've got like the political arm, so doing things like looking into what proposals are out there so far, looking at changes to the law. Another side of that might be, once we've got like a few more members, like how to harness them and sort of like use our members to do stuff, you know, like actions, I suppose, like national actions, or so they might be all in one, or they might be two separate ones. And then also I thought it might be good to have some people looking into debunking greenwashing. So you know, there's loads of stuff to look at there, and I think like a really massive greenwashing FAQ section would be really helpful. You know, just, I don't know, you know, things like when they say, oh, this tree's got to come down because it's got such and such disease, and
Ganoderma.
yeah, and then you can say, well, actually it's that kind of tree and that doesn't get that kind of thing. So, you know, just arming people with facts I think that would be really good. So that's kind of 3 to 5 different groups. What does everyone think about that?
Sounds good.
Yeah. So I mean, there's not many of us on today, so maybe what I could do is, I mean, what did you think about those sort of broad headings? Do you think that?
So we're talking, so we've got a kind of resources for new campaigners with kind of flow charts and stuff like that.
Yeah.
We've got a bit of kind of research, policy, law, a group that could kind of, 1 minute, just I'll carry on amongst yourselves. I've just got to take this 1 minute, sorry.
Ali, did you say to me that one of the things on the agenda for today was to talk about the scope of the alliance or coalition? And it came up earlier. Is it just street trees? Is it all trees? I think some clarity and agreement amongst members would be really useful, and maybe trying to narrow scope to a certain extent so that there's something to get traction on too.
Yes, definitely love to know what people thought about that. I guess my thoughts would be sort of broadly say we protect trees, but actually in terms of our actions, we can direct our efforts at sort of street trees. But I don't know, what does everyone else think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree, because I think, you know, we've got the Woodland Trust, and I think forests, etc., are being more, there's a lot of campaigning around that, and street trees, there's not much. And I mean, that's something, well, Haringey Tree Protectors, that's what we are around street trees. I mean, it can be broader, and I think a lot of the issues are broader, but you're right, I think where we focus in. Something else I just thought would be good to add to our website, which is really just the fact that there is so much ignorance also between with agriculturalists, because we saw this really interesting webinar that Russell Miller had done, when he said that they often don't really know, about various things, and so about how to read whether or not a particular fungi is a problem, etc., etc. So it'd be quite good to amass all that information, because clearly councils don't know. And there's a bit of fungus on a tree, they say, right, it's disease, we've got to get it down. Or there's ivy, right, it's being throttled by the ivy, without actually knowing at all about whether or not that's the case. And we kind of, well, I'm certainly kind of ignorant about different kind of fungi and whatever, but it'd be really useful to know what are the real threats to trees, what are different diseases that actually can be addressed rather than immediately cut down the tree. I mean, there must be so many things you can do before that last drastic step, because that, saying something is disease doesn't mean, I know councils always say, oh, it means it has to go, but does it? I mean, surely there are ways of treating it. And then also around fungi, there's a whole lot of fungi that live quite harmoniously with trees, yet I know that, our council has sort of said something's got fungi and it must go, without actually telling us what kind of fungi and whether it really was a threat. So, I mean, that's a kind of a broader...
I agree. And actually, there's two ways of looking at that. I think sometimes councils will, or whoever wants to cut down a tree, they will, I call it bamboozling. So they'll say, oh, it's got this, so it's got to go. And it's because they want it to go for another reason. So it's greenwashing. Whereas I think sometimes it's ignorance, and they say, oh, well, it's got this, it's going to fall over and kill somebody, so we have to cut it down. So I think that information works on both of those fronts, doesn't it?
Yeah, there's a sort of risk averseness, and that was what came out in that webinar. Where
totally, I think. Sorry.
As soon as the tree's got anything, they're going, right, it's going to fall over. It might come back, and they do this escalating thing. Well, but it might fall over. It might kill somebody, and we'll be held responsible. So we'll fell everything in the borough. You go, well, actually, if you were that bothered about safety, you'd ban cars first.
Yeah.
Because they're more dangerous. I mean, I have got an action to do something on tree diseases and fungi, because I mean, in terms of fungi, the frightening ones are Meripolis and Kretschmaria. If you hear those words, they're not good.
But they do it because they've all got honey fungus, as of all honey fungus. That's what they say.
Yeah. They do a lot of incredibly patronizing. Sorry to the Julian, he's a man and he's a lovely man, but they do this very male thing.
Mansplaining.
Where they mansplain, they tree-splain to you, especially if you're a woman. They say, "Oh, it's got this. It's really scary. No, it's got to go. Got to go, love." And then I mean, so many times men are like ARBs have said to me, or tree surgeons have said to me, "I've done the course. I've done a 2-year training in trees. What do you know? You know nothing about trees." You know, honestly, the amount of time I honestly, they think you're really stupid, or they're trying to pretend, they're trying to condescend, patronize you. That webinar, if you haven't seen it, it really rang so many bells. It opened my eyes, because he said basically the way ARBs are trained is like, so they're trained in this very binary, you know, black and white way. And there's so much like uncertainty with trees. There's so much grey nuance with trees. It's so hard to predict. And then he said the risks are set so high for trees. It's like unlike any other. You know, when he made the analogy with the road, he said it's like on a road's incredibly dangerous. Hundreds, thousands of people get killed every year on roads, and you've just got this white line separating the tarmac, and you're in this metal box, and you're traveling at 70, 80 miles an hour, right? And then but the risks for trees are set so ridiculously high. You're more likely to be killed by a wheelie bin. You're more likely to be killed at home. I mean, it's 1 in 10 million chance, maybe because of the climate crisis, storms now, and the droughts and the floods, where maybe the risks have gone up slightly, but still you're so unlikely to get killed by a tree. It's so rare. I think it's like 10 people in the UK, you know, each year. Maybe it's slightly more, like 30, but you know, it's nothing compared. I don't know. And I think we need to have something like the greenwash bit that you were talking about, debunking myths, and like stopping the fear mongering. So in Haringey now, what they're doing, they're putting a frightening picture on the front of trees they want to fell with Ganoderma, and it's a frightening picture of a tree that's come over onto a car. It's come onto a car. And it's like a scary horror film, you know, and people are looking at it and going, "Oh my God, this tree has, oh my God, of course this tree has to be felled, because that could happen." So it's like, it's a terrible propagandist tactic to scare people. And I can't actually believe they're doing it. I've still got to pull them up on it. I mean, I just haven't.
That's disgraceful, especially if you like he's not even the same. It's whether it's the same species of tree, because like one of the tree officers says to me, he says, "Well, things like rowan." He said, "Rowan get a sniff of Ganoderma and they keel over. They really don't like it. It's to do with some fungi consume cellulose and some fungi consume lignin, and Ganoderma consumes lignin, and you can kind of tell that because if you tap them, they're rock hard,
Right?
You know, they're really solid, so you can tell that basically they're extracting wood."
Christine,
because that's kind of what they're made from. But
you've just volunteered yourself to be in charge of the greenwashing department.
but what they
1 in
are
10 million. 1 in 10 million.
Ganoderma is an indicator of dead wood. It feeds off dead wood.
Right.
So if you see that, it means there is a defect in the tree, but it doesn't necessarily mean the tree is unsafe. Now, if an entire massive buttress root is completely dead, then you might have a problem with the wind in the wrong direction of it falling over, and that's when you do scans and resistorgraphs things to see what's happening. But we've had trees where they actually did a tomograph, and you could see, although there was a Ganoderma, it had walled it off, and you could actually see that the tree had had a bit of a defect, maybe it'd been hit by a car, and it's just walled it off, and this Ganoderma is just consuming that bit of wood, and then it's going to stop.
I think the attitude and knowledge about trees is terribly like sort of 17th century medicine towards humans, where surgeons just cut people's legs off because that was they were the lowest down in the medical hierarchy. And then they came in and sawed legs off or arms off a tiny bit of whatever. And, you know, there's extraordinary misinformation about humours, and that's how our bodies work. I mean, the same with trees. People really know so little, don't they?
Yeah.
Things.
Yeah, but there was an argument. There's a ARB talk. Somebody posted a picture of a tree that had been cut down, and they go, "It's got ash dieback. So is this colour in the middle because it's got ash dieback, and then there's a furious argument with people going yes and other people no.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yes,
I mean,
no, yeah. Are you telling me I don't know what I'm talking about? Yes, I am.
I mean,
It's hilarious.
when I did that piece for The Guardian, I had loads of people piling in. Everyone had a different opinion. That's the thing. And the whole thing with ash dieback is really interesting because at the moment there's a big conservation in inverted commas going on, project going on at the wonderful Highgate Cemetery, which the whole point of Highgate Cemetery is it's like, it's romantic, it's gothic, it's trees are growing out of old graves and it all looks amazing. But they're trying to sanitize it and clean it up. And what they're doing is they're felling, and the main trees in there are ash, and they're really healthy ash. Like in London, actually, ash dieback isn't as bad as other parts of the country. I don't know why, maybe it's a lot of pollution, like protecting them or something. But they're literally felling in nesting season, loads and loads of ash trees, beautiful, huge ash trees, 80 to 100 years old. And I couldn't believe it. And so, and you know, I spoke to the ARB there, and of course he was giving me all the, oh yeah, well, it has to be done, you know, we have to, you know, we have to cut off and we have to do this and we have to do that. And they give you this spiel and they've just got a job to do, you know, they're getting paid to do a job, they're not really thinking. And these trees look so healthy, they did not look bad. They didn't
They've
look
not met the threshold then, they look really healthy because there's 4 categories. Confusingly, Amy has 1 to 4 where 1 is bad and there's the other one the other way around. But it's like whether something's got 75 to 100% of crown, 50% to 75% of the crown, 25% to 50%, or 0 to 25. So if it goes from 50 and starts dropping, it's not going to come back.
Right, yeah.
So the
We
way
had a report recently on planning application,
yeah,
and they said, well, we'll categorize, they were like A or B category trees, and they downgraded them to U just because they were ash. They had no signs of dieback, but they said, well, they might get in the future and die, so we may as well cut them down.
Yeah, well, that's just ridiculous. I mean, like, shoot me now because, like, you know, I might get an illness.
We might as well all just kill ourselves. Just die.
That's the thing. You think people working in the industry would be wanting to protect trees, but I mean, there's a whole area to be
for the developer. You know, CARB reports for developers are interesting.
There's a whole journalism long read that maybe when I finish my thesis I'll do, but it's about the way the ARB industry is in bed with, you know, the whole industry and jobs for the boys, and it's kind of like, you know, the developers getting surveyors to, you know, say trees are not unhealthy when they're not, you know, and to scorch earth their sites, and then you've got ARBs being given unnecessary severe pollarding just to keep them in work through some of the months of the year, which I've heard a lot. It's like, well, what are they going to do? They need work, you know. And there's so much bad arboriculture, like tree surgery going on. I don't even want to call them surgeons. It's more like butcherers. There's so much bad tree work going on. Only a few companies that really do a really good job in our area. And you know, they're literally damaging and topping trees, you know, and giving them diseases with the work. I mean, it's just a system that is quite corrupt, you know, like I think it's quite rotten, a bit like a tree. It's like got proper rot in it, the system, you know. Yeah.
Maybe I can just mention the complaint I put in. Yeah, sorry, Penny, maybe next time, but going off on that, I made a complaint to the Institute of Chartered Foresters about the arborist who did the TPO report on the trees in Plymouth. It was really, really biased. Everyone who read it knew it was biased, and it was quite a horrible process, which I can tell you about later. And I had this 5-hour Zoom meeting with all like the people from the ICF, and it was hideous. But what the result of it was, they didn't uphold my complaint, but their panel were not unanimous. And I thought, oh, poo, I've lost, that's rubbish. But I showed the details of the response to our friend who's an arborist, and he said that he thought that actually I'd won, because reading between the lines, it was quite damning. And now he has stepped down as a member of the ICF, this bloke. So you can, if you've got a lot of time and you're very gritty, you can pull them up and take, you know,
Yes.
make a complaint, a code of conduct complaint to their professional body if they have one.
What's the IB? What's that body? ICF?
Institute of Chartered Foresters. So
Okay.
most arborists will be a member of the ICF or the, I guess, the Arb Association, and they have a code of conduct. So a bit like a counsellor. If you think they've broken the code of conduct, you can make a professional complaint.
Okay.
And that's what I did, and it's horrible. But interestingly, the ICF said they never really had to deal with them before. Nobody bothered making a complaint to them before, and the first time I did it, it wasn't deemed competent and compliant, so I rewrote it, and then they accepted it, and that's why I went to a meeting. But yeah, maybe that could
Interesting.
be in the resources.
So if we think some trees have been unethically, you know, wrongly felled, like they were in Plymouth, we could actually put in a complaint to the tree surgeons who did the work. Is it?
The tree surgeons might not be a member. It's probably an arborist, and the code will say things like, have they acted objectively? Had they, you know, brought disrepute to that? It's a bit like a counsellor code of conduct. It's not like, oh, they did that wrong. It's a bit more sort of.
So it's the arborist who advised, or the tree ecologist who advised the council about the fellings.
Yes. Well, he did a report on a TPO application.
Okay.
And he said they didn't deserve a TPO when they clearly did.
Right.
I'm ignorant, Annie. I was thinking that tree surgeons, by definition, have to be arborists. That's not true at all. Then they're just.
Well, I think they probably. I wouldn't say a tree surgeon does, but an arborist is more likely to be a member of a professional body than a tree surgeon, I would say.
But a tree surgeon isn't necessarily an arborist as well. I mean, they're just
no,
just come in and cut the tree down.
I kind of think of the things. For me, I kind of think of it like people say there's a difference between caving and potholing, and I say, I say no. Except there was something on Arb Talk, and I thought that was a good way of describing it, because somebody said, "What's the difference between a tree surgeon and an arborist?" And one of them said, a tree surgeon knows where to cut, and an arborist knows why it's the right place.
Right. So the tree surgeon is literally just doing the cutting. Yeah.
Yeah, well, they were trying to work out a definition, and they were saying, well, that's it, a tree surgeon, and you know, because then there's butchers who just hack stuff, and you look at it and think, well, that's a totally shit job.
I always think of tree surgeons,
but because they bought a chainsaw off eBay or something, and they've just practiced. And there's videos all over YouTube of them dropping them on people's greenhouses and stuff. They've absolutely no idea what they're doing. But yeah, a tree surgeon will know how to make the right cut. But then an arborist will understand about wound wood and reaction wood and apical growth points and all of that stuff. They'll really understand the mechanics of a tree and how the tree works.
Yeah.
I met some at a climbing wall a few months ago, and they were claiming they were both arborists and tree surgeons. I mean, obviously some that are one and the same.
I think a lot of tree surgeons call themselves arborists, but they don't know they aren't.
Yeah, I think there's not really a proper definition. So it's like caving and potholing. I think there's not really. You can't, somebody came up with a kind of a definition, but I don't think there really is one. Somebody can call themselves one thing or something else.
Because I've had it said to me so many times, I really want to do that course that they've done, so I can say I've done the course too, mate. But I don't know if I could put myself through it. I think it'd be quite painful, but it'd be quite interesting to do. I know Ali's done a really good tree course, but I'd really like to do a short tree course just to develop my knowledge and, get a bit of inside info, and not tell them obviously I'm a tree campaigner, but go in as a kind of, undercover and sort of see the way they're taught. How are they taught? How are they? I mean, I don't know, a lot of them seem to come out and just kind of end up like, doing really compromising work. I mean, maybe a lot of them I think they're very conflicted guys, a lot of them actually, because a lot of them are kind of slightly hippie-ish, and I used to know a tree guy, and I think like it's a bit of a conflict because they do, he did love trees, but he was also felling a lot of healthy trees, and feeling bad about it. And Jeremy Barrell talks about that kind of guilt that he feels, that a lot of the work he did earlier in his career when it shouldn't have been done, he shouldn't have really you know, but then I suppose they've got to earn money, so they're conflicted. It's a conflicted position, I think, to be in. And often we're pitted against them when the people making the decisions are in the council offices, and they're the ones really that, so it's pitting, you know, these two sort of, you know, it's not, they're doing a job they've been told to do. So
yeah, it's not their job. Every arborist will have felled a healthy tree. It's not.
yeah.
In some occasions, people will walk away from
Yeah.
a
I'm
really
really
good
sorry,
tree
I
and
have,
say it doesn't need felling, but
I have to go
someone else
now.
will do it.
No worries, Lucy.
But
Thank
lovely
you.
seeing you all.
Yeah,
Cheers.
we're on time.
Bye.
So, yeah, no, I've had some horrible interactions with, I mean, what's happened, was quite a funny story now, is what they've done in my area now, because they know I work from home, because I'm a writer and I sort of like researcher and I work from home. So I'm like, and our area has these mad acoustics where I can hear, I don't know what it is. We're up on the top of a hill, but I can hear everything. So what they've started doing is they started using these like mini chainsaws that aren't that noisy. I don't know if anyone else. So like the oak tree I'm looking after, right? They've got these like little mini chainsaws that don't make much noise. You can't really hear them. And so I can see it from my window. So I've caught them and I've seen them kind of, bye Penny, thanks for, sorry, we're being a bit gossipy, but and they creep around my area sometimes really early in the morning, like to try and I just, because I'm always out and about, they must think I'm like a kind of like spy. It's quite funny, and they're using these quiet chainsaws, so watch out for them. I don't know what the hell's going on there, but
Might be battery ones. I think battery ones are
Yeah,
quieter.
they're probably electric. They're much quieter.
anyway, so I don't know, Ali, whether you'd be able to put together that list of working groups and kind of, I don't know, another job for you to do.
I can but ask. We'll see what happens. Put it out there, and then we'll see what happens.
So
But,
what I'll do, obviously, I'll try and get Pester Paul. He asked me to nag him, so that's what he's going to get. So, sorry. So I'll try and get the stuff off Paul and then share it with the group. I will also send out the date for the next, just say this is the date of the next meeting. And I will also, yeah, try to, yeah, we're going to try and get a drive so people can like, and try and get people to feed in resources for the website. That was something you'd also maybe ask people to sort of feed in some stuff.
make sure everyone's signed up to the Canopy website, even if you're in this email chain, because I think eventually we'll probably just use that as the mailing list. Do you think that might be easier going forward? So make sure, because Geo was only signed up yesterday.
Am I signed up? I can't remember.
I don't know.
I don't think we are. Is there a link for it?
It says just canopy.org.uk.
Okay.
And so you can sign up your group and you can sign up as individuals. So get your group up, and I'll get Marky to put them all on the website, and then encourage your members to sign up as individuals, because then they'll get the mailing list updates. So eventually, now we've had our little vote and we've got strapline, I can start sorting out the social media and stuff. So it'll all be a bit easier, I think, from then on.
That'd be great. Yeah. No. So, okay. And what's the strap line, do you think?
Oh, I don't know. I didn't tot up the.
Oh, you don't have to do it now.
Yeah. We can save the chat, can't we?
Yeah. No, I've saved the chat and I'll share it with everyone,
Yeah.
and then when I've got the recording, I'll share that as well.
Cool.
That was just bunging links in, because I don't know who else went to the Arbor Association webinar on biodiversity net gain and trees, and that was
was that good?
link in for that. That was really interesting.
Yeah, I went to that one.
Yeah, because BNG4 is sort of strengthening.
Yeah,
trees
what do you
and
think
street
of
trees.
biodiversity net gain? Is it a bit of a greenwashy thing, or do you think
I
there's
think so.
Yeah.
No,
Opinion is it is.
Sort of is, but I think the new metrics helped a bit, but
it's about if a developer removes habitat from a site, then they've got to put it back and 10%. So it's a way of stopping developers just demolishing, just destroying things, and then poking in a couple of twigs really badly planted that die after 5 years, because there has to be a 30-year management plan lodged as well. I mean, the devil is in the detail,
can't they? So it's
regret to say that it doesn't really. I mean, we have this in Waltham Forest. I'm like Jim Waltham, sorry, but we have this problem.
Yeah.
And they actually cut down small wood. I think I mentioned this before, or in Park Britton Way, in 90 trees or something like that. Part of their biodiversity net gain. Of course, they're going to plant them somewhere else, but that area will lose that wood. The new rules are stricter because they do say you've got to leave the gain in that location. That is an improvement. But up till now, biodiversity net gain has really been pretty meaningless, I would say.
Yeah, I think it was poor at the beginning, but they're sort of tightening it up. Like, yeah, so things are supposed to be in.
Yeah, they've got to be in the same
area.
location.
Right.
Yeah.
It's got to at least be in the same area.
Yeah,
Yeah, the thing I found interesting.
Sorry.
The thing I found interesting.
Location, though, can't you?
Hang on.
Can't hear what Lucy said. So it's Ali. So what did Ali say?
I was just going to say that you can still buy off-site mitigation. You don't have to put it.
Right. Okay.
It's very expensive. It's designed to be so expensive as to make you not want to. Or the last Chancellor, there's off-site habitat, but there's something else. There's like biodiversity credits, and they're designed to be so expensive nobody wants to do it.
Right. Okay.
To try and make you plant something somewhere. Sorry, you said, Julie.
Sorry, what I found interesting was the fact that it can't be monitored. It's monitored by the local council. So if you've got a corrupt council in the first place, when it goes on to the credits, it's like the council are the ones that have got to hold it to, hold it to make it happen.
It's even worse in Plymouth. So our council have actually borrowed £500,000 to set up a BNG credit company, so they could basically buy credits off themselves and not.
Yeah.
And they're the ones in charge of the credit, and they've all done really. They've taken parks that we've already got and just coppiced all the trees. So actually now it's impossible for people to walk around the park.
Yeah, we have similar in Waltham Forest, promote their developments, and then of course they control the whole process whereby the BNG work. Absolutely, I think it's not even. I wouldn't even describe it particularly as corruption. It's just simply the way in which they manipulate the bureaucracy.
Yeah, you're right.
You see,
I mean,
there's a role for us
in
with
theory,
that,
doesn't it? But
actually. There is a role for us in actually keeping these people into account. So, there's a 30-year management plan, and somebody go, well, actually everything's dead.
Yeah,
it's 5 years and everything's dead. So actually, come on, council, you need to sort yourselves out. So we think that we do have a bit of a role in actually making sure that 10% actually happens. And the sort of vagueness, well, we can't put it on site, so we'll put it somewhere else. Or where? And to be pushing planning authorities to not just, well, somewhere else, don't worry about the details, we'll sort that out later. You're going to know where.
Exactly. I mean, this is what happened with the McDonald's trees that were felled on Green Lanes, 11 mature limes. And Chris Packham sort of did a really nice thing for us, but this happened 2 years ago. And what they said was, so they felled the 12 trees, McDonald's did, basically, and then the council just gave them a light slap on the wrist because it was the business leader who was the franchise manager. And then they said, oh, we're going to plant them elsewhere. So we're going to plant 4 there and then some elsewhere. And then they never bloody plant the trees elsewhere because, But what I was going to ask you, Ali, was about coppicing. So because in our local nature reserve, they're obsessed by coppicing. Now, I thought coppicing was done, and it's been done for centuries, obviously, for to get for firewood and stuff, to keep the tree, to grow it in a particular way, and then keep the tree alive, but also but they're talking about coppicing our nature reserve. They're obsessed by it. And they felled so many mature trees, right? That was the scandal. That's how I began the campaign group, because they felled loads for bridge inspections. And now they're talking about coppicing and thinning it out even more. And I'm like, what the F is they're obsessed by coppicing?
What park are you talking about?
The Parkland Walk.
Whereabouts is that? Sorry, I know Haringey quite well. I used to live there.
It's a former railway line, you know, the Parkland Walk.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah.
Now they're talking about coppicing. And when you just said that, Ali, so you're saying that they coppice loads of trees in a local park and you can't walk. What do you mean you can't walk around anymore?
Well, it just makes it bushy, doesn't it, rather than sort of
Exactly.
treey. Yeah, so they're doing it for BNG credits, but they're also doing it in other areas in Plymouth. They say they're cutting down trees because they want to improve it. This isn't even BNG, it's just because it's like some people they've trained to use chainsaws and they want to practice, I think. They go, oh, it's for biodiversity, it'll let some light in and then there'll be more
Yeah,
plants.
we've heard that.
They don't do anything, then you just get brambles. So you've lost. It's like, well, if you want better wildlife, plant some trees in a place where there aren't actually any trees.
Yeah.
Don't cut down the ones we have. It's all bonkers. And
they were always talking about like the group I'm part of there. They're a very weird group. They're friends of the Parkland Walk, and they're obsessed by lower level biodiversity. So they're obsessed by letting the trees be chopped down. And this is the problem I have with the group, because they're also working against me as well as the council. They're obsessed by chopping. They think it's going to turn into these like halcyon meadows in like urban North London. And they think, you know, kestrels are going to reappear and like hares and like deer and stuff because they're going to chop loads of trees down. And it just erodes and erodes the canopy even more. And because, you know, we're not living in normal times anymore. They don't realise, just protect it, keep it, preserve it. Don't bloody thin it out anymore. And they think it's going to be, we're like woodcutters of the 19th century and we're suddenly going to get all this wonderful, marvellous woodland. And it's like this weird, a lot of people just don't get that the climate crisis is actually happening, like it's actually happening.
Yeah.
And most of our trees are suffering because of the heats and droughts. And they're kind of, it's like business as usual. Let's just pretend it's a 15th century wood that we can coppice, you know. And
what you find with these areas where they clear them is a lot of trees were reliant on the other trees for protection, so other trees then start blowing down, and it's yeah. And actually, well, in Plymouth, what they've been doing, they rather than doing it in one area and seeing how it goes, like leaving it a year, because they've got a grant bid to do, and I've got to do it before March or whatever, and then they do it all, and then it's like, well, now you've just wrecked 3 parks instead of 1.
If I'm right, the Parkland Walk is quite narrow. It's not a sort of so it's a old railway line with trees along the side. Yeah,
totally. It's like a secondary woodland that sprung up after the railway went into disuse, and it's a narrow.
Yes. So you don't get a lot of space. So if you cut these trees down, then you're actually you lose, as you say, the height of the trees around the. Which section are you talking about here, particularly? Sorry.
Oh, they're talking about coppicing all the way out, and also I talk about flooding. Okay. I'm talking about flooding as well, and the drought, and the disease runs faster through trees. You start thinning them, and then they burn in the sun. They're not as protected in the coolness of the canopy, and then they stop. And then more disease gets in. I mean, I'm just a lay person, but I can read a few things and find out these things, and it's a really misguided, irrational approach. But unfortunately, the friends of that group are really up for it. They're obsessed by butterflies. Look, I love butterflies, and I love
butterflies,
but like, you're not going to get like hedgehogs and butterflies back because you've got dogs running around off leads the whole time, unless you're going to get the dogs on leads and you're going to, like, you know, it's
also, I had recently this thing, it's called like the edge forest effect. So there's some species that, you know, if a forest is quite small, then you won't get certain species in it, and even a bigger one, you'll only get certain species right in the middle or right away from the edge. So actually, if you are making them smaller or cutting ginormous holes in them, you're ending up with more edge. So there's fewer chance for certain species to survive.
Yeah, they're doing some good stuff. So they're building a lot low hedging. They're doing a lot of dead hedging to try and narrow the path again, because during COVID it went mad because everyone was on it running, you know, desperate to keep their bodies absolutely taut and tight. You know, and but anyway, I think I'm gonna go and we're all gonna go and get something to eat, right? It's absolutely lovely. It's been absolutely lovely speaking.
Yeah, groovy. I'll write the notes and send them out.
Thank you so much. And I will send out the chat, and I will send out the recording as well. I wonder who actually watches the recording. Maybe some people do. Hopefully. Yeah. If we advertise it as Pool Pin-Up Powsland, maybe. No, I won't do that.
You could say it's all sweaty.
and leave that out of the recording.
Oh yeah.
So you're still recording.
Oh God, yeah. No. He won't watch, no one will watch it anyway, and I don't. It's not. I don't. That's not true. Anyway, I was just being silly. Okay. Well, listen. Lovely to see everyone. Thank you all so much for coming, taking time, and yeah, we'll be in touch with stuff. And the next meeting is that first Wednesday in June. Yeah.
Okay.
So what's the date of that? Is that the 4th of June? I think so. Is it?
Maybe busy that day.
Yeah, 5th.
5th of June.
Okay.
Yes, the 5th of June. Okay.
Okay.
Okie doke. All right.
Bye.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.